No Man's Sky is like going on a journey. A journey through space. And as travelers, what do we want to take away from that? Well, experiences, obviously. But also, it's a video game, so some stuff, please. Yes, I'd like some stuff. And here is the problem. Many of the toasty takes and grumbles and expressions of that surround No Man's Sky come down to the unwanted geist of heavy expectations. Why isn't it like this? Why can't I do that? Why did I spend £40 on an incredibly niche, chilled-out shapes and colours simulator? And some of these questions are more valid than others, but none of them are terribly interesting. So instead I'd like to focus on the way this game manages player expectations based on what this game appears to be. Not from the perspective of Reddit curtain twitchers, but based on how the game itself presents itself as a final product. Because even when you put the hype and marketing firmly to one side, No Man's Sky is designed in a way which feels strangely compromised. And there's a tangible sense of friction here between how the developers hope that players will approach their game and about the way that most players naturally will. And that's what this video will be all about. How exciting! Have an ice cream. And if we drill to the cold heart of No Man's Sky, we can see a lot of what the game intends to be through the exciting lens of inventory management. I am exciting and interesting, please remain conscious. As I don't understand the game's inventory management system, it's probably best to briefly talk about Out There, a roguelike space thing that almost had exactly the same system. You've got inventory and upgrade sharing the same set of slots, which means you can't lug around useful cargo and cruise through space in a blinged out beast machine. And so far this exactly the same. Out There even features the same system of alien languages that you gradually learn and encounters that can go quite badly if you say the wrong thing. Lots of games did it in the past, of course, but the similarities out there are pretty stunning. And finally, both games want you to keep moving forwards, but they communicate this to the player in different ways. Out There keeps it simple, punchy. If you don't keep moving forwards, it will kill you. No Man's Sky lacks that kind of peril, which leaves the inventory management system they've used feeling like more of a mild imposition than a clear, bold statement of intent. Because in Out There, this inventory system really is the game. Do you trash that minor module to make room for more stuff, or do you play it safe, carry tons of fuel, or hold out for the last thing that you need to create that incredibly powerful technology? It's a game with constant difficult choices based entirely on probabilities. A lot of people don't like it because it's just so much based on luck. But it's a game where you find your head in your hands, knowing that you just jettisoned the exact thing that you really could have done with just about 5 minutes ago. You only carry around the things that you think you'll need. And it feels like this was the spirit that No Man's Sky was keen to engender. Grab stuff when you need it, don't collect everything you see. Hoarding isn't really an option. And from a design perspective, I can totally see why they want to establish this atmosphere. It's a game of transition, keep moving, don't stop. If you allow players to fill up digital vaults, you'll find poor bastards strip mining entire planets for pointless minerals just because they can. On the other hand, design intentions aside, for players it's frustrating. Almost everybody has played a game that looks a bit like this, and the expectations that come with the genre aren't managed here terribly well. Sandbox-style games are almost always about laying down roots and hoarding stuff, the polar opposite of what No Man's Sky wants from you. And while I respect any game that drops you in with a cold start, gosh, I love a cold start, apart from showers in the morning, get lost. No Man's Sky doesn't quite get away with it. It could almost do with some sort of nod to let players know that hoarding stuff isn't a done thing. And it feels to me like the Sentinels might have originally been put in the game to serve this purpose, a slap on the hand that keeps players from acting out of pointless greed. And yet the only real punishment most of the time is having to deal with the tedium of shooting these tiny floaty robots. And yet even if the Sentinels were there to instill players with some sense of restraint, there is this heavier reliance on cash across the board, money which in turn encourages temporary hoarding whilst you don't really have the ability to do it. And now this is where I take all of my clothes off and jump into the paddling pool of speculation. There's a weird dissonance here that I suspect may have come about because of the big question that followed the initial huge wave of hype behind No Man's Sky. And that question, of course, is what do you actually do And perhaps if No Man's Sky hadn't mutated into this AAA status indie demigod, the game may well have ended up having far less emphasis on economic systems and juggling materials. It seems possible to me that this mainstream attention perhaps led to the inclusion of more familiar motivational systems. But regardless of how it all came to be, the game's mechanics and systems at launch feel conflicted. Half the game is telling you to live like a transient space nomad, while the other half whispers that gold is worth money. Collect loads of gold. Even standard video game things like the species log that gives you rewards for finding 100% of the things on a planet feel weirdly at odds with the nature of what No Man's Sky seems to aspire towards. The process of playing sometimes feels like you're trying to force your brain out of a mindset that's been set in concrete by so many other games. And even mild completionist targets like this feel like a taste of the old stuff while you're trying to go along with a game and play cold turkey. And yet the messages instilled in the design of this game are very much hot and cold. While you're initially pushed away from this kind of behaviour, eventually you get more space to hoard and it becomes quite clear that having loads of cash is actually useful. It's almost as if the inclusion of all of these standard mechanics are actively fighting against the design of the game somehow, which at its heart is just such a strange, lovely, willfully vague thing. You know, I'm happy to just explore without tons of cash and a beefy ship, and yet I kind of need something better to defend myself from pirates, and I could do with those upgrades. But I also want more space to store stuff, and without the pressure and peril of Out There, which shared the same inventory system, these aren't decisions that have much meaning. The lack of flexibility in terms of what you can carry and what you can keep just comes across as miserly rather than interesting. And for a game of grand vistas and incredible spectacle, the design is weirdly fixated on microscopic fiddle. It's a small thing, of course, but Matt's video game brain wants a block of materials to be entirely full and neat and complete. And yet you always end up having slightly more go through, and then you end up having to trim away the dregs when you've gathered a bit more of one material than you wanted to. And things like this aren't bad, right? They don't make the game bad. Come on now, let's be sensible. But it's busy work. And it's busy work that isn't fun or thematically engaging, much like the process of endlessly recharging all of your equipment. The materials you need are so readily available that putting the last of your fuel into your ship isn't a moment that feels frequently interesting. Realizing you've run out and need to go and forage feels more frequently like a chore than it does an adventure.
That's a funny joke.
Most of the time, systems like these would engender a sense of tension and fear, perhaps, but they just don't in No Man's Sky because it's all too forgiving. But it has to be. This is the crucial thing. It has to be because the procedural nature of the game means you can occasionally just end up being totally flumped, trapped in a toxic storm, stumbling around trying to find some fuel. For the love of gravy, please, help. Help. And to be fair, while these stomach-turning moments of creeping desperation don't justify managing more energy bars than a Los Angeles snack specialist, these moments where you are stuck and you are up against it and you haven't got enough of things are really top-shelf magic. And they're magic specifically because you're so aware that there might not be an easy way out of it. The procedural nature of the game's worlds adds an excitingly naughty sense of clunkiness to your personal adventure. Maybe this is the fucked planet, where if you land, you're just fucked. Who's going to help you out now? I mean, maybe you'll just be here forever. There's no one on GameFAQs talking about it. Oh God! And No Man's Sky feels largely a bit safe because of moments like these. They've created a game in which the devs can't account for everything that might happen. And yet it's also a game that anyone can play, where you should never be able to get yourself completely stuck. If it was a roguelike or something, it might have had a bit more bite. But as it is, the game's systems feel soft and fuzzy, and often without much real conviction. But when you've no way of assuring that the game you've made isn't going to repeatedly send players to hell, what else can you realistically do? And people have talked so much about how Hello Games have managed to create this incredible technology, but it isn't a magic spell, you know, it's a bloody summoning ritual. The beast they've conjured into existence is one that requires a very careful cage. It's a number of planets beyond the developer's capacity to realistically even observe momentarily. That the game they've crafted it around feels like a piece of muddy design sometimes is understandably disappointing. But it's frankly amazing that they've managed to wrestle the whole thing into something that's even faintly enjoyable. These algorithms may have made the game in terms of exposure, but what was a boon in terms of marketing can only have been an absolute nightmare in terms of making a game that consistently works around it. And yet, despite the game's frequently not quite there systems, there's something about the game that is undeniably magic. And while it's natural to focus, as I have, on culturally embedded motivations like materialistic hoarding, the enjoyment doesn't hinge on these well-worn systems. It's easy to focus on what they haven't quite got right here, but it really isn't the heart of the game. It's a bit of a hefty red herring, because it would be massively remiss of me to dissect all of these systems like a mad scientist without making it clear that it simply isn't a game for people who really just care about systems. Largely, I'm one of those people, but I do have streaks of something else in me too. This is a game for those who love spectacle, surprise, moments of wonder that fire up your imagination, even if they're not consistent. So many of the game's planets end up feeling the same, and yet, for some, the lure of checking out just one more is thrilling enough to carry the whole thing. It's like an interstellar advent calendar. It isn't a game carried by elegant interlocking systems, and that's fine. And that's not to say that beneath the surface there isn't another unusual system here, deeply baked into the soul of the game, that's equally compelling. And to understand what these desires are, I think we need to go back to the procedurally generated universe that the game's conventional systems so obviously struggle to contend with. Because you can't physically own a planet in No Man's Sky. And yet, at least 4 or 5 of them are mine. I gave the creatures strange names, I catalogued the trees, I wrote a joke on the moon. Anyone can visit these planets. I can't stop them, I can't stop you. But in a small, intangible way, these things on these planets will always be mine. And yeah, what's the point in that? In a game about moving forwards, in a game about abandoning the worlds that you discover, in much the same way we jettison the junk or the things that we can't keep. What's the point in this planet being yours if you can't take any of it with you? And yet the answer, of course, is in the other half of the human equation. What matters more than what you can take, other than what you can leave behind? What makes No Man's Sky compelling? What makes it beautiful? Isn't the maths and the complexity behind all of this procedural generation magic. No. It's the fact, quite simply, that there is far too much of it. If all these planets weren't connected slightly online, a universe of this size would be unbelievably pointless. You wouldn't keep naming stuff. You wouldn't feel attached to any of it. It's the fact that we all share this vast universe that brings our experiences with the game to life. And people are so blinkered by the idea that multiplayer gaming is the only worthwhile function of online play that they've failed to see the heart of what makes No Man's Sky feel genuinely magic. It is the world's biggest video game pie, and there's a slice here for absolutely everyone. Knowing that this crap planet is yours. You discovered it, you charted it, you gave that odd tree a stupid name. And a vital part of the magic being sold here is the idea that other people might see what you've done. Someone else will land here, they'll laugh at that joke, or shake their fist at the infuriating Jam_Sponge who discovered that massive tiger thing before they had a chance to, and couldn't even be asked to give it a name. Other people may follow you, but you were here first. Now this is a system that tickles a powerful fantasy. The idea that not only are you leaving your mark on the world permanently, without recourse, but that other people one day will arrive and notice something that you've done. It's a fantasy thematically rooted in historical traditions. Let's put a flag on the fucking moon, etc. And yet there's something about this illusion that is innately very human and simple. Millions of people shooting off in different directions, frantically trying to imprint themselves onto the universe in the hope that anyone else will notice or care. And it isn't just something embedded in the human spirit, it's relevant within video game culture too. In the rush to keep up with modern games culture, there's a very real sense that you're always a few steps behind, discovering that cool bit of that game after everyone else had already finished it and wandered off. Or, oh, have you seen this game? No, I've missed that one. I haven't had a chance. It's no coincidence, I don't think, that No Man's Sky is a game that's best enjoyed with no real sense of rush. There's plenty of pie to go around. So take your time to carve a slice, because the planets you're going to find will still be yours in a month, in 2 months. There's plenty. And here's something unusual that ties into this a bit. You know, games usually provide compelling experiences through immersion, not despite it. Here there's something about the fact, for me at least, that these planets softly pop in as you slowly explore them that amplifies this sense of pioneering. This planet didn't even exist a few minutes ago. This is probably the first time that this is even ever being rendered. Just now, for me. I mean, it's cool. It's powerful. The sensation that you are the actual first person to do this here. It's a setup that frequently finds me feeling strangely attached to planets that are patently just absolutely rubbish. I land, I think, no. I pop out to grab some fuel and end up staying there for hours. It's a rubbish planet. But no. It's not ugly anymore. No, it's not ugly. It's mine. No Man's Sky is a lot like having a baby, except the colours and music are much, much better. And much like having babies, it's crucial to remember that whilst my planets are amazing and fascinating and cool, I don't really give a half a toss about yours. And everybody keeps sharing them on social media, but you know, well, I mean, they're not as good as mine, are they? So I'm not really interested. And while it's crucial for my continued enjoyment of the game that I remain convinced that my experiences are special, I know I don't want to see 30 photos of your amazing baby. Your baby is boring. God, what a boring, tiny little man. And that's No Man's Sky, a game where you feel like you're having a special time and making your mark on the universe and finding things for the first time and being an adventurer and living on the edge. It's probably the best video game ever about masking the reality of screaming into the void. This video, of course, brought to you by a man on YouTube, firing time-sensitive opinions onto the internet. Please hear the words that I say, teach them to your children, scroll them into the rocks so that future generations may know my greatness. Oh God, I'm gonna have a lovely warm bath. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video and temporarily embrace existential terror for the sake of dissecting game design. Honestly, you didn't need to do that. If you've really enjoyed this video, you can pop over to Cool Ghosts and say hello, post a comment. Although do be warned that Cool Ghosts at the moment is on a bit of a temporary hiatus due to life conditions, but we're popping on as and when we can to do stuff because we love doing it. And if you really love our work, you might consider going to patreon.com/coolghosts and supporting it in the future. Although, as I say, at the moment, it's a bit thin. So, shh, maybe not. Bye!